Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our group's webinar this afternoon. Today we'll be covering road safety for local roads, raising awareness, assisting delivery. And our presenter today, of course, is David McTiernan from our Safe Systems group based in our Sydney office. Now, before David commences his presentation, I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping matters. Could I get the next slide, please, David? Thank you. Alrighty, so my name is Angela Juhas and I'm the Webinar Program Coordinator here at ARB Group. So if at any point you have any questions regarding ARB's training or webinar program, I'm your best point of contact. Feel free to get in touch anytime. Now, as I said, I'll just cover off a few housekeeping matters before we move on with the presentation. So today we're aiming for about 40 minutes for the presentation and allowing about 20 minutes total for question and discussion time. Now, we welcome you to send through your questions throughout the presentation. Don't be shy and wait till the end. We are recording today's presentation and we'll be making that available for all of you here today. And we'll also be emailing out a copy of the presentation material. Now, David might ask some questions of you throughout the presentation. In fact, I know that he will be. So we ask that you communicate with us via the questions pane. If you could type in your question and send, we'll receive those at our end. And as mentioned before, we'll try and address those during the presentation, if not at the end of the presentation. Also, if David asks you to raise your hand, then the little hand icon is the one to click there. And just next slide, please. Wonderful. All right, well, before I let David commence his presentation, I will get him to introduce himself and talk a little bit about himself. David, I know that you have quite a rich career, if you would, working with local government in the past, and would you like to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure, Angela, and thank you everyone for your interest in attending this afternoon. I've been with ARB for 7 years now, and prior to that it was 16 years in local government, and I think the local government people amongst us today would understand what that means. As a local government engineer, you end up doing a bit of quite a few things. So I certainly started out in road design, traffic management, moved into road safety, dealt with development applications, consent conditions, inspections, etc. And in about 2007 I left local government and joined ARB Group as team lead about road safety. So I've taken that experience in the last 7 years to learn about road safety, safe systems, and had a good opportunity to work in countries overseas and around Australia. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell for me.
It sounds like you're very much across a lot of areas there, and we're very much...
Jump into the outline now?
No worries at all. You can get on with it, David. Thanks so much.
Okay, again, thank you everyone for your interest and joining us today. Hopefully you will get some information out of the session that you'll be able to take away, have a think about it and apply it to what you do. Very briefly, the outline for the webinar up there on the screen, I'll just touch on a few objectives, learning outcomes, what a safe system approach is and why we adopted it in Australia, and I know there's some New Zealand practitioners in the audience as well, so I've touched on their experience. I'll outline how ARB and Austroads believe local government should operate within a safe system approach to road safety, and I think one of the key areas for local government is certainly institutional support and commitment, so I'll touch on that as well. There will be a discussion session at the end, probably in the last 10 minutes if all timing goes well. And there's also some opportunities for questions. There are some poll questions and there will be some open format type opportunities for you to submit questions if you need some clarification or anything. If we are able to, I will answer the questions today. If not, we'll take them on board and we'll certainly investigate some answers and get back to you. Okay, so the webinar objectives and some learning outcomes. Well, firstly, I wanted to outline what a safe system approach to road safety is within the Australian and New Zealand context. I think that's important to all be on the same page with that, and I'm drawing from what has been put out there in the National Road Safety Strategy and Austroads. I'll be hoping to provide all of you, the participants, with some guidance about a safe system approach within a local government context, and I certainly hope to promote some discussion about a safe system approach and how it can be and should be delivered by local government. Having said that, I don't think any single person or authority has all the answers, and again that's why we've got a discussion session to open up a two-way dialogue on that. So jumping into the rest of the presentation, the first thing I want to do is understand the audience and what your perspective is. So Angela, there's some poll questions coming up, and the first one is, have you, the audience, the participants today, have you heard of a safe system approach to road safety?
Fantastic. Thank you, David. So I've launched that poll, and all of our attendees should see a pop-up box on their screen. So if you could just select your answer, yes, no, or unsure, and submit those, we'll get those through at our end. Now, there are a couple of poll questions coming through, ladies and gentlemen, so just keep an eye on those and select your answers as appropriate. All right, David, so for this particular poll, which I'm closing off now, I'm going to share the results with the participants and let you know that 81% of our attendees have answered yes to that question. So they have heard of the safe system approach to road safety, which is a good thing. Would you agree?
It is. It is. Does that represent a majority of people who have logged in today?
Yes, absolutely. So it's the highest percentage. 81% have answered that way, and I'm just about to launch the second poll so we can get some more answers, a little bit more insight about our audience. So the second poll question there, ladies and gentlemen, is, who feels confident in their understanding of the safe system philosophy? So we've got 4 answer choices there, and I'll leave that open for everyone to get their answers through. And it's looking a little bit even at the moment, although perhaps a higher percentage are answering yes, somewhat confident, which is great. It means we've got a very a learned audience, David, and we can adjust our presentation to our audience. And I'll just share those results with you. So as you can see there, 62% of you have answered that question, suggesting you're somewhat confident at least. And never worry, to those of you who have answered not very confident or not confident at all, we are here to learn after all. And our third poll question, again, just to gauge a little bit more about our audience here today. The next question is asking, are you actively applying a safe system approach to your work? And so our answer choices there are yes, no, or trying but not widely applying it. So if we can get your answers through, that would be tremendous. And it's looking very positive at the moment, David. I've got, I'm just going to close those results now because just about everyone has answered, and share those with you. So, I mean, it looks like people are at least making an effort to apply the safe system approach at work. The highest percentage of people have said, 48% have said that they are trying, followed by yes, actively applying, with 41%, which is terrific. I might hide those results and David, let you get back to your presentation.
No worries. Thanks, Angela. I'm not so surprised by some of those results, although perhaps quite impressed that the people have responded as much as they have, that they understand it well and are applying it or seeking to apply it. I think that's a really good result for local government practitioners to see that that's happening. I think it shows that the message that's come from the national level through to the states and territory jurisdictions is starting to flow down to local government practitioners. And hopefully I won't be teaching too of you to suck eggs, but let's see how we go. Okay, so just some background, and I might try and zip through some of these slides, given there was a percentage of people who had actually heard about the Safe System approach. But a little bit of background looking at the Australian and New Zealand context. So when the National Road Safety Strategy was developed, that's the 2001-2006 strategy, the Australian Transport Council were, the people around that table were themselves, well, we've got a challenge before us when it comes to safety, and that's how we move our thinking from what we've traditionally done, which is manage the road, something which is a more proactive, as it's on the screen there, a genuinely transport system. How do we move into that and then achieve that? I think we're certainly, hopefully, by 2014, in the latter part of that, how we're going to achieve it. But that was a challenge that was set in National Road Safety. The basis that that challenge was the historical events of road in Australia and New Zealand. This is just a chart of annual road deaths dating back to 95 through to 2005, which is when the Safe System approach was first put into one of the national action plans. And the peak time for road deaths in Australia and New Zealand was around the early 1970s, 1970, 1973, where we were killing in excess of 4,600 people each year. And the fatality rate at that time was around 30 deaths per 100,000 population. And for those of us who are familiar with that, you will understand that's a very high rate of road death compared to current expectations. You can see on that chart that by 2005, both countries had achieved a lot in reducing the road toll, but we were still a long way behind the leading countries, with a death rate of 9.8 for New Zealand per 100,000 population. So we essentially halved the number of people being killed each year, but it was still in the order of 2,000 people per annum. And so what was looked at when they were developing the strategy at the time was some key principles that needed to be considered if we were going to improve road safety. And those key principles that were looked at were to develop a road system that was better able to accommodate human error. We are, after all, human, and we are prone to errors. It could be errors of judgment, it could be errors reading the road environment, it could just be an intentional error, something, poor behaviour, poor attitude towards road safety. It was recognised that we needed to establish some strategies that better managed the forces within a crash that the vehicle occupants or pedestrians were experiencing. In the end, it's the forces that the human body is experiencing during a crash event that causes the serious injury or the fatality. So if we could manage those forces better, then potentially we could help manage a lower rate of death and serious injury. The view on economic analysis was that we needed something more robust, something that better represented the scale of the trauma being experienced on our road network. Importantly, the next point, traditionally the road transport system has been about getting people from point A to point B, often as quickly, as efficiently as possible. Safety has been somewhat of a side area, and one of the key principles that was looked at was how do we change that? How do we make mobility a function of safety? In the end, if you don't get to point B because you've had a crash, then mobility suffers. And so putting safety front and foremost was seen as a worthwhile principle if we were going to achieve some improvement in our road toll. We needed to integrate road safety into be more sustainable in human and environmental health policies. Road trauma clearly has a flow-on costs and human impact, and that should be recognised, and that was back to the economic analysis. But how do we make sure road safety is integrated into everything that we do when we're planning a road network? A shared responsibility was required. Traditionally, it's been relatively easy process for road practitioners to blame the road user. They were driving too fast. They didn't slow down in the wet. They didn't look both ways before they crossed the road. It was recognised that if we're going to improve road safety, people who prepare, design, maintain the road network need to take up some level of responsibility for ensuring people are able to go from point A to point B in a safe manner. And ultimately, a key principle of eliminating death and serious injury that can be identified as preventable. It's pointless accepting that some deaths are okay and others are not. They can all be prevented to a certain degree, and a key principle of the safe system approach is certainly looking at zero death and serious injury. So the background to developing the safe system approach in Australia and New Zealand, at the time the leading countries in road safety were, and still are, the UK, Sweden and Netherlands, the top three there. You can see on this chart, which is from last year. So the orders haven't changed very much, but the road fatality rates on the chart certainly have, over the years since 2000, slowly decreased. Looking at the lead countries, it was Sweden in particular had adopted a philosophy of Vision Zero. They believed nobody should be killed or seriously injured on their road network. In the Netherlands, the Dutch had a view of a sustainable safety model. And so the Australian and New Zealand experts were looking at these models and tried to adapt it to the Australian environment, Australian-New Zealand environment. And they first incorporated the safe system approach in the 2005 action plan. It was officially put into the current road safety strategy, the one that covers 2011 to 2020. There's been some changes on what that system looks like, and I'll touch on that in a couple of slides' time. So again, given the relatively high proportion of people who in the audience who have heard about safe system approach, some of this might be very familiar to you. But there are three primary principles to the safe system approach. One is people make mistakes. As I said, the mistakes may be an error of judgment, could be an incorrect reading of the road environment. They might be distracted at a critical moment, and the result could well be a death or serious injury. The second principle is that there are limits to what the human body can absorb during a crash. We will suffer death and serious injury if the impact speed are above certain limits, which are fairly well established through research, through crash testing, and obviously analysis of crash data. Some of that research has developed these sorts of S-curves. What this shows you is on the y-axis the risk of a fatality occurring during a particular crash type for a given speed. And I think this is a debate that hasn't really happened within the community generally about what level of risk we may accept on our road environment. But let's assume that a 10% risk of death might be acceptable as a measure. You can see that for a pedestrian being struck by a vehicle, then the impact speed would be the order of 30 kilometres per hour. If you apply what actually occurs on our road network, where we have general urban speed limits of 50 kilometres per hour, you can see that for that crash type, at 50 kilometres an hour, an impact from a vehicle is in excess of 80% likely to kill the pedestrian. The same approach for the other two types of crashes. So for a head-on type collision on our road, which would be prevalent on undivided roads, particularly rural roads that are looked after by local government, you may have a 10% probability or risk of being killed. If you had an impact speed, remember this is impact speed, not speed limit, of 70 kilometres an hour, and that would escalate exponentially to well over 80% if we had an impact speed of 90 kilometres an hour or higher. The third principle of the safe system approach is that we should design, we should manage and present a forgiving road transport system, a forgiving road environment. That implies that everyone involved in providing road infrastructure needs to understand the safe system approach and needs to be an active player in it. So that includes planners of the road environment, town planners, planners at the engineering stage, road designers, those who build the roads, and certainly those who maintain the roads after they've been handed over to local government and other road authorities. But what does all of this mean, and how is a road environment a safe system? Well, the original concept in the 2005 National Road Safety Action Plan presented this sort of diagram to represent the safe system approach. Centre to that is the managing the physical forces to what the human body can sustain without death and serious injury. Key objective, the overall outcome, we want safe travel. Three key elements: safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads and roadsides, all underpinned by having alert and compliant road users. That's that shared responsibility area. I'm not suggesting, and the safe system approach doesn't support, that road users have no responsibility. Clearly they do. But if they make an error, the road environment needs to take over and make sure they're at minimum risk of being killed. There's various inputs, and I think a number of these inputs to the system are important for local government to understand what they are and how they can contribute to them. Understanding the crash risk on your road network, providing education to the community, to road users, how road users get admitted to the system. That is traditionally about licensing and training and education. It can be broader than that. Enforcement, certainly primarily with the police, but there are other areas of the road environment where enforcement can be taken up by local government. As I said, that was in the that was in the 2005 Action Plan. In the current National Road Safety Strategy, this concept was changed to be presented as a 4 pillars or 4 cornerstone areas approach. Same description, same areas: safe roads, safe vehicles, safe people, and safe speeds. If you have a look at the strategy, it describes the inputs, the things you need to understand when you're trying to achieve a safe system. So this is the current concept that's being promoted in the National Road Safety Strategy. A lot of the state road authorities have restructured or developed programs that fall under one of these pillars. At an international level, you'll find the United Nations as a 5th pillar, which is post-crash care and emergency response. That's not within the National Road Safety Strategy in the same way as these 4 cornerstone areas are. In New Zealand, they, I think, have got a very good strategy, and they presented the concept visually a little bit different, but all the same things are there. Centrally, they want to have a road system increasingly free of death and serious injury. You've got the 4 pillars: the safe roads, safe speeds, safe vehicles, as well as the other inputs to how to achieve that system around the outside. These documents, the Safer Journeys Strategy and the Safer Journeys Action Plan, Both of them are available on the New Zealand government website. You can see on the slide there. The Western Australian government adopted, I think from memory it was in 2008, a very similar conceptual presentation of a safe system approach to what New Zealand has adopted. So even though things have changed slightly for the safe system approach, it hasn't stopped us moving forward with it, and this is the latest comparison chart of deaths per 100,000 population of OECD nations, and you can see still very similar order of the performance, with United Kingdom, Netherlands and Sweden leading the top three. Their fatality rate per 100,000, 3.1, 3.3. Australia's as a nation, 5.7. You can see quite some variability there on a jurisdictional basis, but overall 5.7, and for New Zealand 6.4. Still a fair bit of work to do if we're going to get anywhere near the front of the pack, so to speak. But it is achievable, and it just may take a little bit longer, and I think local government has a key role to play in contributing to the reduction of this 5.7 rate. With that, Angela, I just thought I might open it up if there's anyone who may have some questions. They may want some clarification on anything presented so far.
No worries at all. We do have a couple of questions come through, David, so I'll run those past you. The first question is from Jeff, and Jeff is asking, is there any data on any once-off actions that have made major changes, for example, the 40-kilometre speed limit around school zones?
There is quite a lot of research about treatment countermeasures, particularly in the physical environment, what the effect of, say, putting a roundabout might be, and those sorts of physical treatments. There's also been some research looking at the effectiveness of reduced speed limits. Obviously, in Australia, we introduced nationally the general urban speed limit of 50 kilometres per hour quite a few years ago, and I know each jurisdiction had done their own assessment on the effectiveness of that, and I believe Austroads has also undertaken some research. In terms of school zones, I think that would probably vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but again, I know there is research out there. I don't have it at hand and I can't quote any figures, but certainly I would recommend, Jeff, that you and everybody query the Austroads website. If you're from local government, you have free access to everything on there, and I'll touch on some of that a little bit later. And certainly put a few queries into their search engine. You might come up with the published research there. If you want, I can always get in contact with you after the presentation and we can talk more about it.
All right, that's great, David. And look, we've just got one more here from Hugh, so I'll get you to answer that for us as well, please. Hugh wants to know about the charts shown before. So human tolerance, he says it interests him. How much does this vary with age and physical well-being? It seems to me that the young and fit will survive much better than the physically not quite right or so. What are your comments on that?
Look, I would agree with Hugh completely. Age would have an effect. Those charts were developed, and again, I can provide the references there for the research. It was initially developed overseas, and it has been reviewed within Australian context as well. It is a generalised curve. I think it's, if you think about it, a child pedestrian, given the relative size to the vehicle, and an adult is not likely to do as well as perhaps someone in their 20s. But clearly someone in their 20s is going to perform a lot better in a crash than someone who's quite a little bit older. So age will certainly have an influence on it. But those S-curves that I presented there are more generalised, and they've looked at crash data as an overall as input into development of the curves.
Thank you, David. All right, look, we have received a couple more questions from Christine and Ritesh. Thank you both. We might address those at the end, David, or get back to them individually after the webinar, just in the interests of keeping to the time limit today.
Yep, definitely. No, and as I said, my email and details will be at the end, and I'm happy to receive more questions afterwards if we don't get time. All right, so moving into why a safe system approach is relevant to local government. Fundamentally, local government is the road authority for over 84% of the road network in Australia, and in New Zealand it's about 88% of the road network comes under the local government care and responsibility. Local government is the tier of government that manages land use planning and development. And I know that's a little bit different in some jurisdictions. It can be subject to the size of the development, but typically it's local government that deals with land use planning, the development applications that come in, which will create many new roads and adds many more road user interactions. Local government is specifically mentioned in the National Road Safety Strategy, and the Australian Local Government Association has identified within their own transport policy agenda the role that they believe local government has in road safety. So I think, given that context, it is clear that road safety is relevant to local government, and given the move nationally and indeed internationally, it follows that the safe system approach is applicable and relevant, and I think local government has a lot to take on board from the safe system approach. ARB undertook a research project for Austroads, and the report was published in 2010. You can see the report number there. It found that 51% of casualty crashes, so that's death and injury crashes in Australia, occurred on local roads. In New Zealand, the figure was 65% of casualty crashes occur on local roads. That translated to 40 and 46% of fatalities occurring on local roads. So, to a certain degree, regardless of what the state and national or the federal government does on its road network, without active involvement of local government, based on those figures, over 800 deaths and thousands of injuries will still occur on our respective road networks. For these reasons, given the role and responsibility of local government, given the number you need to understand and challenge the current practice of development consent. What does Council do to stipulate how it will design and plan for future road network? How does it identify consultants preparing road infrastructure? Road management, are council's design standards and DCPs up to date? The asset management area of council, what are they doing to contribute with work with and interviewed asset safety benefit, but it's not necessarily their primary focus. Capital works, what do we do when we're designing, when we're funding capital works? And obviously the recurrent funding which gets back to road maintenance. A lot of that design and capital works, no one's going to be able to click their fingers and develop a safe system overnight, but it needs to be commenced as soon as possible across Australia. The Western Australia Local Government Association was very proactive in promoting a safe system approach to their members. In New South Wales, we've got Wyong Shire Council, which has been recognised, winning a couple of road safety engineering awards for their efforts and their attempts to embed road safety more broadly across their organisation. So it can be done, and I think it needs to be considered at an industry level rather than individual councils. But clearly there are some leaders out there that may be able to help inform this debate. Taking some of those points and just expanding on a little bit, raising the awareness. It's important that all professionals involved in council understand their role or their potential role in road safety. In New Zealand, there's some very good information, simple brochures, a couple of pages only, which just outline to professionals what a safe system approach is and what their role is, what the changes are, what they're moving from in a traditional sense, and what they should be moving to if they're going to achieve a safe system outcome. There are some pamphlets, again, based in New Zealand, which target specific disciplines. So you can see on the screen here, some for engineers, there's some for the town planners. It's not just about people in council though, obviously you need the support of people outside of council. You need the support of other professionals, the police, the state road authorities, and for New Zealand they understood that the coroners play an important role, and so they've got some information there to explain what a safe system approach is. And that's important because coroners may come up with findings and conclusions which can be quite critical of the road authority, and in applying a safe system approach it may not be immediately obvious why something has occurred, and so coroners needed to be informed on that. And I think something that all of you would agree, all the local government practitioners amongst you would agree, the community and the elected officials need to understand what it is. If you're trying to achieve a particular outcome using a particular process, if the people who pay the rates, who are making the decisions at the high level don't understand it, then it may be all for naught. So look at how you can raise the awareness of the safe system approach to people within the community, and importantly, obviously, your local elected officials. Challenging practices, as I said, development control plans, local environmental plans, standard conditions of consent that all support, all require road safety to be considered by developers and their consultants. Road safety audits, road safety assessments and road safety reviews can all be stipulated as being required. Every jurisdiction, state and territory jurisdiction in Australia, and I know in New Zealand, has a policy and a process in place for road safety audits. There's no reason local government can't apply that to developers. Feedback from former local government colleagues suggests there's resistance, there's a misunderstanding by consultants and developers. They may believe that road safety audits only apply to state road authority projects or water council projects. It doesn't, it can apply to theirs. Asset management, what risk assessment is done of the road network? This is an example of a road that I did an audit on as part of a road safety strategy for a particular client. This road is speed limited 100 kilometres per hour. You can see the offset there. The pavement width, by the way, would be about 5.5 metres, edge of bitumen to edge of bitumen, no shoulder, drop off into a very severe culvert with roadside hazards along basically its entire length. From an asset management point of view, what risk assessment is being done to say we need to put some more money into maintaining or fixing up this particular asset? If you can't put money into fixing the physical asset, what can be done to manage the risk? And certainly speed management is a key function of the safe system approach. And it may be one way to offset some of the risk, lowering speed limits. It's not unreasonable over a certain given distance. The time saved by having a high speed and high risk road is pretty minimal compared to a lower risk road and a lower speed limit. To assist organisations, and this isn't just the councils, there's a new international standard, ISO 39001. I'll touch on that in a few more slides in a little bit more detail. In 2010, ARB convened a round table with primarily state road authorities from across Australia and New Zealand, although I do understand there were some local government representatives there as well. And the purpose of that round table was to open up and say what can be done from an infrastructure perspective to apply a safe system approach to what we do. The key findings of that I've got up on the board there. So a broad adoption is required. We need to share good practice. We need to learn from each other. Austroads, ARB, state road authorities don't have all the answers. Some of these infrastructure projects might be trial and error, but by sharing that research and that experience, we can all learn from each other and then move towards best practice. Two areas of infrastructure within a safe system context were identified. There was primary and supportive infrastructure. Primary infrastructure clearly seeks to maximise the safe system principles. Supportive will contribute to it. So a road safety barrier will be considered a supportive infrastructure because it hasn't prevented a crash. It certainly manages crash forces, which can reduce the risk of death and serious injury. A primary infrastructure would be to remove the roadside hazard altogether, so you don't need to protect it. Speed management, touched on it a few times already. Central to a safe system approach, better speed management so we can manage crash forces. Having a functional hierarchy. What we find is that you may have arterial, subarterial and collector and local roads. That doesn't always apply to the setting of the speed limit. So let's have a hierarchy that's functional, that dictates what type of traffic, what sort of speed limit will be applied. So when we get to local roads where you've got pedestrian, the most vulnerable road user interactions occurring, that we minimise the risk by having a speed hierarchy, the type of traffic and interaction that's suitable for that environment. Important to that is self-explaining roads, a concept that is being applied in Europe. It's a road where the road user, the driver in particular, will clearly say, I need to slow down or I need to drive in a certain manner because this environment is likely to have pedestrians or likely to have more cross traffic, and so they will adapt their driving automatically. It's clear from their view of the road environment what level of driving behaviour they need to apply. And another key outcome, risk assessments. Very important that you understand the level of risk on your road network. Just looking at the time, Angela, I might just clip through some of these slides because I really want to get on to the discussion section as well. But keep in mind they will be short. and medium and long-term infrastructure measures. In the long term, I think technology, intelligent transport systems is going to be important. I think that's something local government is going to have to come to grips with eventually. Clearly, it's expensive, it's targeting high volume roads, but eventually that will need to filter down to local road networks. So we might jump into the next poll questions, Angela.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're getting everyone to type their answers into the question box for this particular poll question. So the question there is, do you believe local government has a role to play in delivering road safety and a safe system? So your answer choices there are yes, no, and only with funding support, though if any other creative answers come through, we'll certainly take those also. And I just wanted to apologise to our wonderful audience today. We did have a little hiccup with the audio that many of you would have noticed, so thank you to those of you who alerted us to that. And not sure what's happened there, but we are investigating. So if anyone wants to type in those answers, we'll leave that open for another second or two. We're getting lots of yeses. Yes, but we need the funding. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, but we need the funding. So there you have it, David. I think that's the majority vote at the moment is answer choice number 3.
Not an unexpected result. Certainly not an unexpected result, Angela. So the next poll question.
Yep, and once again we'll ask everyone to type in their answers in the question box. So this time we'd like to know, what do you believe are the road safety priorities for local government? So we want to know your feedback and thoughts on this particular question. And once again, if you can type them into the the questions box rather, we'll check those answers at our end. And we did receive a number of other really great questions earlier on today. We're very mindful of time and we do need to finish the presentation. However, we will endeavour to get back to everybody who asked questions and follow up with you after the webinar. Please don't hesitate to obviously get in touch with us at any time also. All right, well we're getting quite a few answers coming through now. We have black spots, we have getting more funding being an issue, improving fleet safety, up-to-date collision data is another issue. Community and professional awareness and adoption, building into local government processes. Thank you, Ryan, for that one. Pedestrian and cycling safety, thank you, Amal. Different for different councils, depends on area people covered by CNCL. Thank you, Hugh. All right. We've recorded all of those answers at our end actually, and I think it would be quite interesting to perhaps share everyone's answers amongst our attendees here today, and maybe even get a post-webinar discussion going on that. We certainly have a lot of opinions coming through, David.
Excellent. Thanks, Angela. And again, some of those answers don't surprise me. I guess there's 2 levels that we need to look at. One is certainly the big picture as a local government industry. What are the priorities? And then individual councils or regions will certainly have priorities focused more on the detailed infrastructure. We might touch a little bit more on that in the discussion section. So I'll keep going and we might skip any questions, save them for the discussion section. Angela? What I wanted to do was raise some awareness about what research and guidance is available for local government practitioners. So that's what the next session is about. So what we have is a National Road Safety Strategy, and I would encourage people to download that free of charge from the BITRE website, and obviously New Zealand from their NZTA website. There's Austroads. All local government organisations in Australia and New Zealand are automatically members of Austroads. ARB itself has a library on its internet and physically in our Melbourne office, which is a very good resource of research that's available from around the world. ALGA, the Australian Local Government Association, would be able to assist, and they obviously have some level of recognition and assistance available. And obviously jurisdictional support. Definitely encourage you to consult your state road authority and see what assistance they can provide, both in funding and I think, as at least one person mentioned, information awareness at a professional level. The National Road Safety Strategy is based on quite a lot of research and discussion and policy development. ALGA is a key contributor. It gets reported annually to the Standing Council on Transport and Infrastructure, and it identifies 7 direct and 3 indirect actions relevant to local government. Again, you can find that off the BITRE website, and it does make interesting reading for where at a national level they think local government should be doing stuff and also getting support to implement a safe system approach. Austroads, its role is to develop and disseminate practitioner guidance, undertake research to back up those guides. And the Guide to Road Safety, Part 4 in particular, is written for local and community road safety. But in addition to that, and no doubt most of you are aware of the guide series, there's a range of research reports available. And if you subscribe to their Road Watch alert system, it will identify, based on keywords, new research that's published each year. You can see just on those on the screen there the examples of asset management within a safe system approach. Obviously, it would have relevance to local government, and there's a particular report, as I mentioned earlier, published in 2010 about road safety on local government roads. Presents quite a lot of analysis of crash data, showing where the problems are. In addition to that, there's a plethora of other research reports and guides available on the Austroads website, and that's, as I said, freely available to people in Australia and New Zealand who are working on government. That's what's available currently. Austroads funds an ongoing research program, and here's just a snapshot of some of the projects that I know about. Some of them I'm involved in as either delivering or as quality manager, and that have relevance to local government. Improving roadside safety, harmonisation of best practice speed limits. What will the implications for that be to local government? Safe systems in the planning process. Safe systems for local government, that particular project on the quality manager for, it's looking at actual physical works and actions that local government can take that will be safe system or heading towards a safe system sort of level of compliance. Reviews of road safety audit guide and treatment of crash locations guide will be more firmly bedded on the safe systems approach. Just a quick poll question. Again, this is about awareness, and I guess one of the things we want to understand is how aware people are of what is available. So over to you, Angela.
Alrighty, so the question is your council actively accepting the role for local government outlined in the National Road Safety Strategy? So yes or no? For those of you who are answering yes, if you could raise your hand, or if you want to type it into the questions box, that's okay too. Otherwise, please do raise your hand. Now, at this stage, we don't have very many hands raised, so I'm guessing either a quiet audience or they're all saying no. I might leave that open for another moment or two to give everyone an opportunity to give their feedback, and I might just close that off now. I think we have a lot more no's than we do yeses, David, so what do those results say to you?
I guess that, a follow-up poll question would have been a good one too, and maybe splitting that at a professional and a management elected level. Again, I guess I'm not surprised by that sort of result, and it's probably partly a lack of really understanding by management, the elected and the community people out there, and to a certain degree some professional understanding. There's a second poll question there, Angela, that we just want to find out about.
Yeah, absolutely. So this one is in relation to Austroads, and I'm just going to launch that for everyone to see. So the question is, what awareness of Austroads do you have? And 3 answer choices there. Regular reference to the guides, regular access, Austroads guides online, or Austroads, who is Austroads? Hoping that's not going to be the most popular choice, but we'll keep that open for another couple of seconds for everyone to get their votes in. And it looks like most people have gotten their votes in now, so I will close that off and share the results. And David, it's looking like 71% of people have answered question choice A, so regular reference to the guides and research reports.
Right, regularly reference guides and research reports. That's encouraging. That's encouraging because there is a lot. Austroads decided to go on a web-based publication of its guides a couple of years ago, and that is to try and keep them up to date. So it is important that you regularly access them online, not just use hard copies or electronic copies you've downloaded. A few minutes to go, and this is the last session prior to a discussion, and I'm happy to hang on a little bit longer if we're able to, Angela, for any discussion that might go over time. Institutional support and commitment, and I think this gets back to perhaps the previous question about active commitment towards it, towards the safe system approach. And I'd certainly recommend getting a copy of this report published by the OECD, Towards Zero Ambitious Road Safety Targets and the Safe System Approach. It has some really good information in there. It was an international tour, so to speak, of what is done around the world in road safety, and they picked the best bits and put them together into this document. Their clear outcomes: set ambitious road safety targets. Ambitious but achievable. No point setting the bar so high people get despondent about even trying. Develop intermediate and final outcomes. The intermediate are important because you need to understand that you're on track or where you may have diverted from the final mission. Undertake data collection and analysis. And I think we had a couple of earlier questions about whether there's data and analysis available to prove certain points. That last point is also important for Austroads because Austroads doesn't manage any roads, so it looks to local government and the jurisdictions for data and experience for their research. That is a framework that was, those in New Zealand may be familiar with it. It was certainly identified by the authors of the report, the OECD report, that this is a way of looking at how to develop a road safety management system. It's clear the functions of any organisation need to be adapted and need to be results focused, they need to be coordinated, and I think in local government it's very important that the engineers and the road safety officers know what the town planners are doing, what's happening with development, for example. Clearly you need some legislation to back up what you're doing. Importantly, you need to monitor and evaluate what you're doing. Somewhat difficult for councils, I suppose, and to a certain degree that's why Austroads and the state road authorities are about. They certainly undertake research. But importantly, knowledge transfer. What's happening within your council that is making non-traditional road contributors aware of a safe system approach. You need to develop some interventions and obviously, as I said on the previous slide, be results focused. What sort of results do you need to develop? What are the inputs to it? And I guess in this area you need to understand what council can influence. I touched on it earlier, ISO 39001 Road Traffic Safety Management System, a document that is written for organisations to develop their own road safety focus, their own road safety strategy. Those organisations can be commercial, they can be government, and it's certainly something perhaps should be encouraged in major employers and businesses within your LGA because they contribute to road safety as well as councils. I'll just skip over that. You can read it at your leisure later, but certainly recommend having a look at ISO 39001. So a few conclusions that hopefully you can agree with and take away from the session today. The Safe System approach is an effective framework, regardless of how it's visually represented. Understanding the safe system pillars, safe roads, safe people, safe vehicles, and safe people is important, and how the Council can contribute to each of those. Develop performance targets and track what is happening so that you know you're still on track. All tiers of government, including local government, need to be involved, and share best practice, share poor practice. We need to know what hasn't worked as much as we need to know what does work. And together then, Austroads, the state and local government practitioners will be able to move towards best practice. I know I rushed the last few slides in that, but what I really wanted to get to was the webinar discussion period. Angela, I'm not sure how we're fixed for time after the 1 hour period, but I'm happy to stay online for a while longer. And these are the sorts of things I would like to hear from the participants. What areas would you like covered in other sessions? There is the potential for ARB to develop this as a series, maybe a 3 or 5-part series, and obviously today's session would be an overview, an introduction, and later sessions would perhaps delve more deeply into specific road infrastructure or specific actions and approaches and information for practitioners. And is there road safety research that you as a practitioner would like to see undertaken or would like to contribute to? So with that, Angela,
All righty.
That's my part of the presentation.
All right. Well, what we might do is we might leave the webinar open for a few more minutes. I appreciate there are a lot of questions that have come through, and look, 1 hour is indeed a very short time frame. And as David mentioned, we are looking at developing a webinar series that will delve into this in a little bit more detail, because we appreciate it's not something that can just be skimmed over in an hour. And that actually relates to a question that we received from one of our audience members, Adam, who was asking what training is available other than auditing and treatment of crash locations that gives people road safety advice. So David, would you say that this upcoming webinar session is something that would be helpful to Adam?
That would be the intention, definitely, and that gets back to that first bullet point. What would you like to hear more about? There clearly is some training at a tertiary level. There is obviously knowledge transfer workshops, such as what ARB delivers based on Austroads material. And I know certain jurisdictions, and New South Wales, the Centre for Road Safety is one that has just started rolling out some awareness of the safe system approach for local government practitioners. What exactly that covers, I'm uncertain at this stage. But beyond that, it's probably fairly limited. And that's, I guess, a gap that ARB has identified, and why we're exploring this sort of webinar as a series rather than a one-off. So if it was to be developed, first thing is we'd like to hear from local government what you want in that sort of a series, and then certainly ARB would be keen to present it.
Absolutely. And look, just on that, David, when the audience leaves today's webinar, they will receive a little pop-up survey come up on the computer screen, and it's an opportunity for you to give us your feedback not only on today's webinar, but of course shape our future webinars. Indeed, if this webinar series does come about on safe system for local government, obviously we want to tailor that to what the people need. So we don't want to tell you what you need, we want you to tell us what you need so that we can accommodate that. Now, we've had, as I said, a couple of questions come through. I'm not sure we'll be able to address them all today, but here's one from Tony. Tony is asking, how much of an influence, or rather what position does ARB have with local governments when it comes to investigating or justifying safety initiatives and campaigns? Similarly with Roads and Maritime Services in New South Wales?
ARB is not a government agency. It has no specific influence directly, but what ARB does is deliver a large proportion of the Austroads research. that agenda is set by the state and federal government representatives and Austroads itself, and ARB does nominate directions for research along with other research organisations. So our influence is probably indirect in the sense that we undertake research, we present findings. For ARB in particular, those findings and that research and practice makes its way into practitioner guides. But the guides then become, to a certain degree, mandatory, but they're still, it's not legislated as mandatory. So our influence is indirect in many ways, but we work together with state and local road practitioners, and I think these sorts of seminars, particularly the webinar series, is the opportunity to at least make people aware and through that influence.
Certainly. Okay, we might just take one more question for the moment, and as I said, if anyone has missed out, please do contact us after the webinar. David is more than happy to be harassed by anyone, so he's got his telephone number and email address up on your screen now, and we will of course be sending out a copy of the presentation material as well as a link to the recording of this webinar, so that anyone who missed anything today or in fact would like to refresh their knowledge can view it again. Now a question from Amal. So he's asking in relation to some of the differences between the state road tolls. He was saying state road tolls. Have you had any approach to analyse those crash data information to find any pros and cons between states' safety in roads? So simply, is there anything Northern Territory can learn from other states in terms of safety for road users?
That's, I think the short answer to that is yes, and not just for Northern Territory, but for any jurisdiction can learn from others, and local government obviously can learn from other councils and other jurisdictions. Fairly controversial question, particularly given the Northern Territory's recent action to open a certain section of highway to unlimited speed. I don't know there's an easy answer for that, but other than yes, there's certainly things can be learned from others, and that's what Austroads is trying to build upon. And a lot of the research into crash experience from one jurisdiction to the other is dealt with in different research reports published by Austroads, and some of that is contributed to by other research organisations. So again, if you want some data which indicates what the difference is and potentially why, have a look on the Austroads website, or perhaps we can talk about it in a different forum.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for your time in joining us today. I apologise that we went over time. I hope that we couldn't get to everybody, but I hope that we covered a nice percentage of you at least, and got some good answers there. Anyone is welcome to contact David or myself, depending on what your questions are after the webinar at any time. We're very open to being contacted by phone or email. David's details are up there on the screen once again. And we do look forward to hearing your feedback and any guidance you can give us with respect to developing further training on this area, what would be of interest to you. Thank you, David, for your time. I really appreciate your efforts today and also in the lead up, and for making yourself open to our audience for them to contact you after the webinar as well. So with that said, thank you everyone. We hope you can join us next time, and have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for participating.